Houston, do we have a problem? The Astros are not good, and I don't think any of us really expected that in the division that they're in. I mean, the Mariners are there, and Rangers, and it is good division, right? But this is a team that we know how successful they've been. They were my World Series pick for the AL. They start the season 7-16, and there is a lot of issues going down there, and a lot of aspects down there in Houston. Will, I'll start with you. To you, what is the main problem right now in Houston?
The main problem I actually think is the bullpen, which is not what I expected going into the episode. Obviously, they've had a boatload of starting pitching injuries to the point that if you take all their starting pitchers on the IL, you could every one of them would be a great person to have in a whole other rotation. Like you could if you had a team right now, if everyone's injured list were facing one another, Astros would dominate because they have Valdez, now Christian Javier, Luis Garcia, was it Jose Urquidy and Lance McCullers. Like it's amazing um how many injuries they have to their pitching staff right now. But that being said, pitching as a whole is the issue. There are last in the AL with a 5.10 ERA, 29th in baseball. They have allowed the most runs in the AL. They've walked the most in the AL. They are last in WHIP, which is walks, hits, and innings pitched. But when you break down the ERAs between the pitching staff and the bullpen, I have their starters ERA is actually 4.5 right now, and their bullpen ERA is 5.66 with your two back end guys, Hader and Presley, supporting 8.38 ERAs and 8.31. Yes, it's easy for a relief pitcher, especially early in the season, to have their numbers balloon from a bad outing or two, but I looked at also how many of their outings this season they've allowed runs. Hader has allowed runs in 5 of his 11 outings this season, and Presley in 5 of his 10 outings, which is way too high, especially for a potential setup or closer's role. You need them to be good like 70% plus of the time. And just to give you an idea of how you can have a bad ERA, but maybe it's not quite as bad as you think. Brian Abreu for them has a 4.91 ERA. Not terrible, but you want him again to be a back end guy. And so hopefully it's a lot better. But he's only allowed runs in 2 of his 11 outings. So he obviously just had 2 bad outings, and otherwise he's been really good. But having a 5.66 ERA in your bullpen, especially when we were saying ahead of time their bullpen was going to be their strength, especially after signing Hader, that's the big thing they need to fix. They're going to get their starters back from the IL. The bullpen, though, they're kind of stuck with the guys they have.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say you brought it up at the end there. When we had talked about the Astros in the preseason look in and stuff, we had said, look, Hader's gonna come in and he's gonna be a great back end piece for them, and we know how good he is, how he's been through his career. Ryan Presley has also just been getting lit up this year, so it is very odd. And I mean, yeah, the stat that is the craziest to me really is the whip. When you consider, Ronel Blanco threw 17, was it, innings without giving up a hit, and for their whip to be as high as it is and as bad as it is, just really is a testament to how bad their pitching is. Because when you have a guy like Blanco who's just been dealing, that number should not be that high. And I think you look at all the numbers pitching wise for the team, and it is just not good. As you mentioned, bullpen ERA has just been awful. The other thing I looked at too is like they're not getting strikeouts. They're 28th in strikeout to ball ratio, and that's only ahead of Colorado and the White Sox, which those two teams are going to be the bottom feeders in every stat this year. But John, I mean, I'm sure you're going to piggyback off this with the pitching. Is there anything else you want to add on that side of thing for Houston?
Well, when you look at Josh Hader, he's given up 9 earned runs, or 9 runs, all of them earned. And then his what is it? His home runs that he's given up. He's only given up 1 home run this entire season so far. And then you also have Brian Abreu with a 4.91 ERA, who has given up 6 runs, all of them earned. And then, but really in their pitching rotation, you have Hunter Brown, who has a 9.68 ERA with uh, 3 earned runs, 3 runs, all of them earned. It The pitching is the issue here with the Astros. Their lineup right now of from top to bottom, except for Jose, uh, Jose Abreu, has a really good batting average and good on base percentage, and their numbers across the board on offense are really good. So when it comes down to it, it is 100% the pitching that is costing them games, specifically the bullpen. So you know, it's one thing that I thought was interesting. This was brought up on MLB Network. Uh, I'm curious how much uh, Dusty Baker, how much they are missing him in situations like
Mm.
this. He is a guy that would have, gone in there and would have really, pulled the team together, I feel, and would have done a good job with that. Whereas their manager now, Joe, I can't pronounce his name, Joe Espada. I
Yeah.
probably butchered that. I apologize.
No, you got it.
Anyway,
You got it.
okay. It doesn't seem like he's able to really pull this team together, and it's April. We've seen the Astros bounce back, but this is not a young team anymore. We also have to keep that in mind. Their core is not the same age they were in 2017 when everything really took off for that organization. This modern day dynasty that is the Houston Astros. So it maybe this is them showing their age. Maybe it's the fact that they are missing Dusty. Who knows? But at the end of the day, the numbers don't lie, and the bullpen and the pitching need to get better in order for the Astros to save their season.
Well, I mean, I kind of agree with Will though on this point. Like, you literally take 5 of their starters that are on the IL right now, and you put that into a rotation. I'd take that rotation against almost anybody in the league. Like, that's how bad it is right now. As we already mentioned, I mean, they get Verlander back this week, which is obviously going to be huge for them. He pitched on a couple days ago and got the win. But Urquidy hasn't played
And
yet this year after an injury. Good.
and Ty, you're right. You're right. When it comes to getting those starters back, they're going to get them back. But but what happens late in games when your starter isn't in there anymore and you have to rely on your bullpen? What are you going to do, especially in the
I,
playoffs? We've seen the
but I
bullpen make
mean,
all the difference.
I get that, but you'd have to imagine that at some point they are going to figure it out. And it's tough to say when you look at the numbers now, but um, there is guys that have been around for a while. They're you know guys with a lot of pedigree. They will turn it around. I'm sure Hader will. I'm sure Presley will. So I think they'll get it back. But I mean, dude, your Urquidy's been out. Framber has been out, and now that was elbow inflammation. So hopefully, I don't think we've gotten an update on that from a couple weeks ago. What his status
I
is.
believe
Christian
Framber
Javier.
Valdez is expected to come back. Is not it's not as a serious thing really. He could come back
Okay.
fairly soon. I read today.
Okay. I mean, Luis Garcia from last year, Tommy John, like, dude, like, it is really insane. Um, and like on paper, coming into the season, if you looked at their rotation now, it's honestly you wouldn't think it'd be as bad as it is. Like Hunter Brown being as bad as he's been is surprising. He was one of their up and coming stars and starting pitching prospects, but he's really struggled, and it is just it is amazing because if you look, as you said, offensively, they're third in team batting average, they're fifth in OPS, they're fourth in WRC plus. Like they are swinging hot bats outside of Jose Abreu, which I don't know what they're going to do with that first base position if they look to pivot because he's batting um, terrible right now, like
It's
0.68
081.
average. Or
Or oh, it's
yeah,
that.
the 0.68 average, 0.85 slugging percentage.
Okay.
Really, really bad. And they have. I think John Singleton has kind of been playing a little bit more because of this, but that's just not. They're gonna have to maybe go somewhere. But I mean, Altuve's been hitting well. Jordan is, I think, the scariest hitter in baseball, in my opinion. So the offense is gonna continue to be good. It's just can they keep up is the
As
question. Uh,
Yeah, as
with the
long as
pitching.
you have Jordan, as long as you have Altuve, you have a chance to open up any game. But the problem is, what are you going to do when the other team can respond? We saw this with the
Yeah,
Braves. We saw it against the Rangers. Their bullpen right now can't keep runs off the board.
yeah. I think they will figure it out, and hopefully they do for their sake. But I have to say, I mean, Jordan, Altuve, Bregman, Kyle Tucker, like that is a scary four to have in your lineup. So I think having that will just carry them for as long as they need to. Well, I'll ask you, what do they need to do to turn this around? And I mean, do you think they will? I'm pretty sure I know your answer based off of your logic, but what do you think?
The short answer, yes, they'll turn it around. Now getting into why. The biggest thing I think for the pitching staff is just getting at least two guys back. I know we said they have a long list. You need to replace JP France and Hunter Brown right now. They've allowed 35 of the starters 59 runs that, again, just the starters have given up. So that's astronomically high. You take that away, it's not as bad as it seems. And probably because of their poor performances have led to probably bullpen arms being overused, and that's another reason why ERA probably is shot up. So, like we said, they got Verlander back. They should hopefully be getting Valdez back sooner rather than later. If one other person on the IL can slip back in early May, then you immediately are taking away the two worst options in your starting rotation, and hopefully by then your bullpen is also eased down a bit. I am a strong proponent that numbers will eventually level out to what their norms are for their career, at least roughly what you'd expect. So these ERA numbers are just astronomically high for this talented of a squad. It will correct itself. But back to what you had kind of said before, though, about it was either you or John about being needing to stay competitive in or needing to stay competitive enough so that they can get back into the race when everyone's kind of clicking. It's going to be hard right now because you have the Rangers that are very much off to at least a little bit of a better start than I would have said for them, even though they're probably only a couple games over 500.
One game.
Mariners have an easier stretch coming up. So, it's may only be April, but falling 5, 6 games back in division can be a lot. And they're what second worst record in the American League right now, even in the wild card race. Yes, I'll say it's early many times tonight. Many of you will want to punch me for how often I say it. But there's like
Is it
3 or 4 teams that aren't in the wild card race right now that are still very much going to be competitors throughout the season. You fall too far behind them. We saw what happened with the Padres last year when they fell behind for most of the season and tried to claw back late. Astros aren't careful. That'll be them this year.
You have to be careful too because the Rangers, as you said, they're one game over 500. But it sounds like they're getting good news on Max Scherzer, where he is going to be back earlier than
Mhm.
expected because his rehab is going well. The Mariners, after a slow first two series, are starting to put it together a little bit, where they're back at 500, and you'd expect the Mariners to continue to play well. And a lot of people have slept on the Angels. I do think ultimately they are going to finish about where maybe a little bit more than people expected, but about around the same. But that they're also they've been a tough out right now. And I mean, if you're the Astros, you have the Athletics over you by 2 games. That should in itself say more than anything. But looking at their upcoming schedule, because I think this is obviously important. They have some tough series coming up. They have the Cubs for
In
3
April,
games
yes.
and in April, yes, at Wrigley. They have the Cubs. Then they only have 2 games at Coors Field in Colorado. You would hope that they come out on top of that. Their projected starter for Game 1 is Ronel Blanco, who has been so good. So you'd expect wins there.
With
Then
how
they
their
have the
offense is hitting,
Guardians.
with how their
Yeah.
offense is hitting, that Colorado series is going to be a lot of runs scored.
Well, also how bad Colorado's pitching staff is, that'll play into effect. Then they have a 3-game series versus the Guardians, who have been really good. They have a 3-game series against the Mariners, and then they are in New York to face the Yankees. And that is the first week of May. So, like, there's some tough matchups there. Colorado, the easiest, obviously, out of those teams. But I mean, all those teams right now have been off to great starts. We expect them to be around playoff contention, if not in playoffs. And you're 7-16. I get that it's April, but you need to turn it around sooner than later because you do not want to get you don't want to get too far behind, especially in the division that they're in. I don't think you can afford to because you have 2 teams alone in your division that are going to be pushing for playoffs. So I think they got to turn around soon. I think out of this stretch that I just said, they have to find a way to go over 500 in that stretch, and come out better on the other side. But it has been a struggle right now for Houston, and it's just not expected. Again, a team that has been just a staple of the MLB. I get that there's the controversies with them and all, but they've been a staple for years now, and they still have, in my opinion, one of the best core fours or cores in general in the league. So you'd expect at some point in time they will turn it around. John,
So,
what do you think is their key?
well, honestly, I think that their key is, like you said, have the you need in this next stretch. You're going to be facing some pretty good teams. That one's off to a really hot start in the Guardians. You have the Cubs that are around 500. You have the Rockies, which you should sweep. You should come away with tons of runs in those games. But then I remember you said the Yankees, you said the Mariners, and then I
Yep.
forget the third team. Um, but those are series that are going to be tough, and their bullpen is it's if they don't fix it quick, their bullpen is going to bury them. And that's what I would be worried about if I am the Houston Astros or I'm an Astros fan. And something that you brought up is the you know is the scandal, the cheating scandal, the stealing signs. So this is really the first year without Dusty Baker since then, and was a big reason why I think that they were able to turn it around and turn that huge black eye into a World Series championship. Having him as your manager really made quite a difference for that team that was is still getting booed relentlessly and having trash cans as like their immediate like sign for opposing fans. So, it would have been easy for a team to get swept away in that and get lost in all of that controversy and everything, but the Astros didn't, and I think a big part of that was Dusty Baker, and this is really the first time where they're facing adversity without him at the helm as their skipper. So, when it comes to their leadership, their manager needs to also, and their coaching staff needs to also make a difference here as well, and really needs to help improve. Otherwise, they can get buried real quick.
Yeah, I think anytime you lose a manager of Dusty Baker's quality, it's going to be tough. And I'm not going to give their current manager, like, I'm not going to bury him yet because you don't know. Now, we did have a conversation off air yesterday. We were talking about the Phillies and like team culture with managers and stuff like that. Could it be something there? I think it's way too early to tell, and I don't even want to speculate about it. But um, yeah, I mean, again, Dusty Baker was a great manager, obviously, and losing him is tough. But this team should still be able to put it together. Like again, you have your core four that have been there for a while. They're really, really good. It's a scary lineup, and your pitching, once healthy, is one of the best in the league. So,
They should be,
guess,
but as we also discussed, sometimes a manager can make all the difference. Look at the Phillies
yeah,
with
I
Joe
agree.
Girardi.
Yeah, I look, I agree. It's just I don't want to bury him yet because I don't know. I really don't with that. Like again, something too early to tell.